I never thought it would happen like this. I never imagined that the dream of my son's wedding would leave me with such a heavy heart. A heart full of sorrow instead of joy. But that's exactly how it went down. I had always envisioned this. Moment my son Nathan, grown and successful, finding his soulmate and starting a life of his own. The love I had for him was immeasurable. And as a mother, I only wanted the best for him. I wanted his marriage to be the beautiful union that everyone dreams of, a bond built on love, understanding, and family. But instead, it felt like I was losing him, piece by piece. Even before they said their vows, the lead up to Nathan's wedding had been a whirlwind. My excitement knew no bounds. As a single mother, I had always dreamed of this day, the day when Nathan would find someone who could make him happy, someone who would love him the way I did. I worked hard to make sure that Nathan had everything he needed in life. I sacrificed so much over the years. His father, James, had left us when Nathan was just a baby, and I had taken it upon myself to be both mother and father to him. I didn't mind. I was strong. I loved him with everything I had. I worked multiple jobs to make ends meet, never wanting Nathan to feel the absence of his father. I never wanted him to want for anything. I spent my nights staying up late, making sure his homework was done, making sure he had a warm meal and a hug at the end of each day. But I had to admit, there were moments when I wished I could do more. I had moments of guilt, wondering if he felt the absence of a father figure, if he missed that role. But I did my best to make up for it in every other way I could. I thought Nathan and I had always been close. I was the one he turned to when he was upset, when he was confused, when he didn't know what to do. I helped him navigate the ups and downs of growing up, the challenges of adolescence, and later, the difficult transition into adulthood. And I hoped, beyond hope, that he would always remember how much I had sacrificed for him, how much I loved him, and how proud I was of the man he had become. So, when Nathan announced that he had met someone special, someone he wanted to marry, I was overjoyed. Her name was Emily. She was everything I had hoped for, a smart, kind, beautiful woman who seemed to truly understand Nathan. He spoke so highly of her, telling me how she made him feel like the best version of himself, how she supported him in everything he did. He was glowing whenever he mentioned her, and I couldn't have been more thrilled. The idea of gaining a daughter-in-law filled me with happiness. I saw it as the beginning of a new chapter for our family, a chapter where I would share in Nathan's life with a new person by his side. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, I went above and beyond to make sure everything was perfect. I spent hours helping Nathan plan the event, picking out decorations, selecting the perfect venue, and even finding the perfect dress. It wasn't just about the wedding. It was about making sure that everything went smoothly for Nathan. He was so busy with work and his personal life, and I didn't want him to have to worry about a single detail. This was his big day, and I wanted it to be unforgettable. I remember the morning of the wedding like it was yesterday. I was up at the crack of dawn, double-checking everything. The caterers had arrived, the flowers were being arranged, and I was bustling around, making sure everything was in place. Nathan was already dressed in his tuxedo, looking every bit the handsome young man I had watched grow up. The pride I felt in that moment was indescribable. He was no longer my little boy. He was a man, standing on the cusp of a new life, a new adventure. As I stood in the mirror, adjusting my own dress, I felt a mix of emotions. I was excited for him. I was proud of him. But there was also an underlying sadness. The kind of sadness that only a mother can understand. The realization that things would never be the same. This was the moment I had been waiting for, but it also marked the beginning of a shift. My baby was getting married. He was creating a life of his own, and I had to learn to let go. When the ceremony began, I felt my heart swell with emotion. Nathan looked so handsome standing at the altar, waiting for Emily to walk down the aisle. And when she appeared, I couldn't help but be impressed. She was beautiful, confident, and graceful. She walked toward Nathan like she belonged there. And for a moment, I felt a pang of pride. This was the woman my son had chosen. This was the woman who would walk beside him for the rest of his life. But as they exchanged their vows, something started to feel off. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but there was a subtle shift in the air. Emily's smile, though radiant, seemed a little forced. She was polite, but there was a coolness to her demeanor that I couldn't ignore. She didn't seem warm, not like the kind of person I had hoped would embrace me as a mother-in-law. And as Nathan looked at her with those adoring eyes, I felt a pang of unease in my chest. It was as though something was changing, something I couldn't control. The reception that followed was supposed to be a celebration, a time for family and friends to come together and share in the joy of the newlyweds. But instead, I found myself standing on the sidelines, watching as Emily became the center of attention. Everyone gravitated toward her, and she seemed to take it all in stride, laughing, chatting, and making everyone around her feel special. I tried to make conversation, but each time I approached her, she greeted me with polite smiles and brief responses. It was as though she was holding herself back from truly connecting with me. I could see it in her eyes, this faint, almost imperceptible look of distance. It wasn't just that she was busy with the wedding. It was something deeper. It was as though she was actively keeping me at arm's length. She never once asked me about my life or how I was feeling. She didn't inquire about my memories of Nathan as a child, the things that only a mother would know. It was as though she didn't care to know. I tried to brush it off, telling myself that it was just nerves, that Emily was probably feeling overwhelmed by the wedding and the new life she was about to step into. I wanted to believe the best in her. I didn't want to see the subtle signs that, in hindsight, were so glaring. But deep down, I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was wrong. As the night wore on, I tried to speak with Nathan, to get some time with him, but he was swept away in the whirlwind of wedding guests, people congratulating him, clinking glasses, and celebrating his new life. He didn't seem to notice the subtle shift in his interactions with me. Or maybe he did, but he chose to ignore it. Every time I tried to talk to him, it was as though he was in a hurry to get back to Emily, to make sure she was okay, to make sure she was happy. It was a harsh reminder that the dynamics were changing. He wasn't the boy I raised anymore. He had someone else to focus on now. And I was being left behind. As the night came to an end, I watched Nathan and Emily leave for their honeymoon. The joy I had felt at the beginning of the day had faded, replaced by a sense of loss. I thought about the years we had spent together, the bond we had shared, and wondered if it would ever be the same again. I couldn't help but feel as though I was being left behind in their new life, a spectator to their happiness, but never truly a part of it. It was only the beginning of what would become a painful realization. That Nathan's marriage to Emily wasn't just about gaining a daughter-in-law, but about losing my son. The days, weeks, and months after Nathan's wedding felt like a slow unraveling of something I had once cherished deeply. Every day I would wake up hoping that things would go back to normal, that the distance between Nathan and me was just a passing phase, a side effect of the whirlwind nature of wedding planning and settling into married life. But the truth began to hit harder each day. Nathan wasn't the same person anymore. And Emily, his wife, was the architect of this painful change. It started with small things, little shifts that seemed insignificant at the time, but when looked at through the lens of hindsight, were glaring signs of what was to come. Nathan no longer called me as often. Where once he would phone me every few days, excited to tell me about his work, his friends, or even the smallest events from his day. The calls grew less frequent. When he did call, the conversations were short and often felt strained. He would tell me about his new life with Emily, but always with an underlying sense of distance, as though he was trying to keep me at arm's length. I thought at first that maybe it was just the hustle and bustle of married life, adjusting to new routines, new responsibilities. After all, he was building a future with Emily, and surely that would take up a lot of his time and energy. But then came the silences, the pauses in our conversations that lasted too long, too uncomfortable. I would ask him about how he was doing, how his new job was going, and he would respond, but with a detachment that I had never experienced from him before. The real shift, though, came when I noticed how little Nathan and I were connecting emotionally. As a mother, I had always prided myself on the close bond I shared with him. We could talk about anything, his fears, his hopes, his triumphs, and his failures. But now, even when we were together, it felt like we were talking past each other. He would sit across from me, his eyes glazed over as he answered my questions, in clipped sentences, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't really there with me. It was like I was talking to a ghost of the son I had known for so many years. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself that it was just the stress of married life. After all, they had just bought a new house. Emily was busy with her job, and Nathan was still adjusting to being a husband. But as the weeks turned into months, the emptiness in our relationship became undeniable. I would visit their apartment more frequently, hoping to catch a glimpse of the warmth and connection I had always dreamed of for Nathan and his new wife. I hoped that if I saw them together, it would reassure me that everything was fine, that Emily wasn't the reason for the growing distance between Nathan and me. But each visit seemed to make things worse. Emily's coldness became more pronounced over time. At first, I had tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, thinking she might just be shy or overwhelmed by the responsibilities of being a newlywed. But it was more than that. She didn't seem to care about my presence in their home. She never initiated conversation with me, never asked about my life or anything personal about Nathan's past. She wasn't interested in hearing about the moments I had shared with Nathan when he was a child, the little quirks that only a mother would know. No. Her focus was always on Nathan, always on maintaining her space, her control. The most painful moments were when I would try to speak with Nathan, only to be interrupted by Emily. It was subtle at first, a gentle redirect, but as time went on, it became more overt. If I tried to ask Nathan about something important, she would step in, cutting me off with a question about their plans for the weekend, or what they were doing with their friends. If I suggested anything that involved just the two of us, like a lunch out or a trip to the park, Emily would quickly chime in with "That sounds lovely, but we already have plans." It wasn't even an attempt to be polite. It felt like a dismissal. And Nathan, ever the dutiful husband, would just nod in agreement, never once standing up for me, never once pushing back against Emily's subtle but clear exclusion of me. The worst part was that Nathan didn't seem to notice it. Or, if he did, he chose to ignore it. The man I had raised so compassionate, so loving, and so attuned to my feelings was gone. In his place stood a man who, though still good-hearted, was blind to the hurt he was causing me. He didn't understand the emotional toll that Emily's behavior was taking on me. Or perhaps he did and didn't want to confront it. I began to feel invisible. My phone calls to Nathan were met with one-word responses, and when I texted, it took him hours, sometimes days, to reply. I began to notice the growing pattern. Whenever Emily was around, Nathan's attention shifted entirely to her. If I came by their apartment unannounced, Emily would be the first one to greet me, and not in a warm, welcoming way. It was always with a polite but stiff smile, as though she was just tolerating my presence for the sake of her husband. But when Emily wasn't around, Nathan and I would have moments, small moments, where it felt like things were almost the same as they had been before. He would relax, let his guard down, and talk to me like he used to. That those moments were fleeting, and the walls between us grew taller and thicker each time Emily entered the room. I tried to hold on to hope. I tried to keep believing that things would change, that Nathan would see what was happening, and recognize the strain his marriage was causing between us. But the reality was beginning to set in. Emily wasn't just controlling Nathan. She was controlling their life, and I was being pushed out of it. I was no longer the first person he turned to, the one who knew him best. And, despite my best efforts, it was clear I wasn't going to be able to change that. The breaking point came when I invited Nathan and Emily to dinner at my house. I had been trying for weeks to get them to visit, hoping that maybe, just maybe, they would come together and spend some time with me. Just the three of us. I prepared a beautiful meal, set the table with candles, and waited anxiously for them to arrive. When they finally showed up, Emily immediately took charge, telling me that she wasn't hungry because she had already eaten, even though she had RSVP'd that she would come for dinner. Nathan, as usual, didn't seem to notice, and the two of them spent the evening talking only to each other. I sat there, watching them, and I felt a pang of bitterness rise up in my chest. They were so happy, so absorbed in each other, and I felt like an outsider, a mere spectator in their lives. My son, my flesh and blood, was sitting there, laughing with her, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. He didn't need me anymore. He had Emily now, and she had replaced me in his heart. It hurt more than I ever imagined it could. I was no longer the one who mattered most in his life. The night ended abruptly. Emily made a quick exit, claiming she was tired, and Nathan followed without a word of apology. As I closed the door behind them, I felt a final, crushing blow to my heart. I had invited them into my home, into my life, and all I had received in return was emptiness. As I stood in the silence of my home, the realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Emily had not only taken my son from me, she had taken the very essence of who he was, the person I had nurtured, raised, and loved for all those years. And Nathan, my sweet, loving boy, had allowed it to happen. In the days that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about that night. I wondered how long it would take before I was nothing more than a distant memory to Nathan. How long would it take before I was entirely erased from his life, pushed aside for good? I couldn't stop asking myself why I was being treated like this. What had I done wrong? What had changed? And yet, despite all the hurt, despite the pain of feeling so completely alone in my own son's life, I still loved him. I still wanted to reach out, to mend what had been broken. But I knew, deep down, that the wall between us was growing higher, and it was harder to climb over with each passing day. Emily had succeeded in her goal. She had created a world where Nathan no longer had room for me. I woke up every morning with the weight of my thoughts pressing heavily against my chest, my heart in a constant state of turmoil. I had reached a point where it felt like I was trapped, unable to move forward and unable to go back. My son, the boy I raised with so much love and care, was slipping further and further away from me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The pain of seeing him drift toward his new life with Emily was something I couldn't shake off, no matter how much I tried to tell myself that everything would get better. But as the months went by, I began to realize something that filled me with dread. The distance between Nathan and me wasn't just a phase. It wasn't a temporary shift. It was permanent. It wasn't just that he was caught up in his new marriage. It was that Emily had firmly placed herself between us, and Nathan had allowed it. He didn't even seem to see it anymore. It was as though he was living in a different world, one where I no longer had a place. I tried everything I could think of to reconnect with him. I invited them over for dinner, planning out every detail of the evening, hoping it would spark the kind of warmth and closeness we once shared. I cooked his favorite meal, the one that always made him smile when he was younger. I set the table, with care, lighting candles and arranging everything just so, in the hopes of rekindling some of the magic we had when he was a child. But Emily always found an excuse to turn down my invitations. And when she did come, she was polite but distant, never allowing me to get close to Nathan. The few times Nathan did come over without Emily, I thought we had a chance to reconnect. But even then, it was different. He wasn't the same. The conversations we used to have about his dreams, his fears, and the little things in life had become almost non-existent. Instead, we talked about work, the weather, or other trivial topics that never seemed to scratch the surface. One missed the long talks we used to have, the kind where I could hear about his hopes and struggles in a way that felt real. But now, when I looked into his eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Indifference. I would try to tell him how much I missed him, how much I loved him, but he would brush it off with a vague, "I'm fine, Mom," or a hurried change of subject. And it wasn't just the conversations that had changed. When we sat together, there was a physical distance too. A space between us, even though we were sitting side by side. It was like I was a stranger to him now. And the worst part was that I couldn't find a way to make him see the hurt I was feeling. Every time I reached out, it felt like he pulled further away. It wasn't long before the cracks in my relationship with Nathan began to show in the smallest of ways. I noticed he wasn't calling me as often, and when he did, it was often just because he needed help with a bill, advice about a problem at work, or just someone to talk to when things were tough. But I was always a secondary priority. It was as if the only time I mattered was when it was convenient for him. And even then, our conversations were shallow, lacking the emotional depth they once had. At first, I tried to keep my feelings inside, not wanting to appear weak or needy, but the reality of the situation was becoming undeniable. Emily had made it clear that she was the most important person in his life, and I was being left behind. I had tried to convince myself that it was just a phase, that once they settled into married life, Nathan would return to being the loving son I had known. But as time wore on, I could feel that the bond between us was slipping away, like sand through my fingers. Then, one fateful evening, I decided to confront Nathan. I had reached my breaking point. The constant feeling of being rejected, of watching my son slip further away from me, had become too much to bear. I had to know what was happening. I needed to know where I stood in his life, and I couldn't wait any longer. When I called Nathan, I asked if we could meet. I knew Emily would likely be there, but I didn't care anymore. I needed answers. I needed closure. When I arrived at their apartment, Nathan was waiting for me, but there was something different in his demeanor, something that made my stomach tighten with fear. He looked at me with a blank expression, his face devoid of the warmth that had once defined our relationship. "Mom, we need to talk," Nathan said, his voice lacking its usual warmth. I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. I had prepared myself for this moment, but now that it was here, I was scared of what I might hear. As I sat down on their couch, the air between us was thick with tension. I couldn't help but glance around their apartment, noting how it had changed. It was decorated in a way that felt impersonal, as if Emily had taken over every aspect of their home. There were no photos of Nathan and me, no mementos of his childhood, no evidence that I had ever been a part of his life. It felt as though I was being erased from his world, piece by piece. Nathan sat across from me, his posture stiff, his eyes avoiding mine. I could tell he was struggling to find the right words, but that only made the situation worse. I knew he was uncomfortable, but I also knew that I needed to say something that would finally break through the walls between us. "Nathan," I said, my voice trembling, "I don't understand. What happened to us? You've changed. We've changed. I feel like you don't need me anymore." He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "Mom, it's not that I don't need you. It's just, things are different now. I'm married. I have a wife. I have responsibilities." "I understand that, Nathan," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But that doesn't mean you have to push me away. I'm still your mother. I've always been here for you, through everything. And now, I'm just not a part of your life anymore." Nathan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly struggling with my words. "It's not like that. I'm not trying to push you away, I swear. It's just, Emily and we're building our own life together now. Things are changing, and I guess I just didn't realize how much it would affect you." I felt a pang of hurt, but I pressed on. "That Nathan, it's not just about you and Emily. It's about me, too. I feel like I'm losing you. I'm watching you slip away, and I don't know how to fix it." Nathan's face softened, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes. But then Emily walked into the room, and that moment was gone. She stood there, watching us, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. "We need to talk about this later," Emily said, her voice cold and calculated. "Nathan has a lot on his plate right now, and I don't think this is the best time for this conversation." Before I could respond, Nathan stood up, his face flushed with discomfort. "Mom, I love you, but I can't do this right now. I'll call you later." And just like that, the conversation was over. Nathan left the room, following Emily, and I was left standing there, my heart shattered once again. It was as if all the years we had spent together, all the love and sacrifices, meant nothing to him anymore. Emily had won. She had taken him from me, and there was nothing I could do to change that dot. I left their apartment that night, my heart breaking in a way I didn't know was possible. I had been given the final blow, the confirmation that my relationship with my son was no longer what it once was. Emily had succeeded in her quiet, calculative campaign to remove me from Nathan's life, and I had been powerless to stop it. As I drove home, tears blurred my vision, and I thought back to all the years I had spent raising Nathan. I had given everything for him, and now, in the blink of an eye, it felt like I was nothing more than a distant memory. I could never have imagined that his marriage would cost me so much. The pain was unbearable, and as I lay in bed that night, I realized something that broke me even further. I had lost my son, and in the deepest, most painful part of my heart, I knew that I would never be able to get him back.